This story is titled, I Found Out My Girlfriend of 8 Years Was Cheating on Me with My Best Friend at His Freaking Wedding. To top it off, I found out all my friends knew about it and were laughing at me behind my back. Instead of flipping out right away, I played it cool, acted like I didn't know. Then, at the wedding, I dropped the bomb and nuked not just his big day, but his whole life. Hey everyone, we put a lot of time and effort into finding these stories to keep bringing you the best content. If you enjoy what we do, it would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. Your support really makes all the difference and keeps this journey going strong. Thanks so much for being here with me. Now, let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Hi, Reddit. I'm not sure how to even begin writing this. It feels weird typing all this out, but I guess it's therapeutic in a way. Looking back on my life a couple of years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I had a solid career, a long-term girlfriend, and a close group of friends who were like family. Or so I thought. Now, I'm sitting here wondering how I was so blind. Let me rewind. In college, I was part of this tight-knit group of 7. We all met in our department, 4 women, 3 men, and quickly became inseparable. It wasn't just about parties or studying together. It was more like we were family, the kind of group that would drop everything for each other. Or so I thought. There's Ethan. He was my college roommate and my best friend. I mean, this guy was like a brother to me. We lived together for 4 years, laughed about the dumbest things, and had each other's backs through thick and thin. If you had told me back then that he would be the one to stab me in the back, I'd have laughed in your face. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Then there's Nicole. She was part of our group before I even joined, but she and I started dating during our 2nd year. It just clicked. You know when you meet someone and everything feels easy? That's how it was with her. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. We were together for 8 years. 8. We went through ups and downs, but I really believed we were building something long-term. Marriage, kids, a life together. It felt like a given. Nicole was closer to the group than I was at first. But once we started dating, I became part of it too. I didn't just get a girlfriend. I gained a whole circle of friends who felt like family. Ethan, of course, became a big part of that too. He wasn't as close to everyone at first, but since he was my roommate, he got pulled into the group. Life felt good. We all stayed in touch after college, hanging out regularly, going to weddings, birthdays, and even taking trips together. I thought I had it all. A successful family business that I was managing, a girlfriend who'd been with me through everything, and a best friend who I trusted with my life. But in hindsight, there were cracks I didn't notice. Nicole and I started having issues about a year before Ethan's wedding. I was ready to settle down, get married, start a family, but she kept pushing back. She'd say things like, I'm not ready yet, or let's wait a little longer. At first, I thought maybe she had a point. We were both busy with our careers, but the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I mean, we were practically living like we were married already. We'd been living together for 4 years. Our finances were stable, and I was making more money than I ever had running my dad's office supplies company. Marriage felt like the natural next step, but every time I brought it up, she'd find a reason to stall. She started saying I was pressuring her, or that I should focus on my career. What did that even mean? I was already doing great at work. At the same time, I noticed she was going out a lot more without me. She'd stay late at group hangouts, go to parties I wasn't interested in, or spend weekends with friends while I worked. I didn't think much of it because I trusted her. After 8 years, why wouldn't I? Looking back, I realized I was too naive. I never suspected anything because Nicole wasn't the type to pick fights or act distant. She still smiled, laughed, and made me feel like we were okay, even when things weren't. I'd think, yeah, we're fighting about marriage, but every couple fights. We'll figure it out. Around this time, Ethan's engagement was announced. He'd met his fiancée, Lauren, about a year earlier, and things moved fast. It didn't seem like Ethan, honestly. He wasn't the type to settle down. But Lauren came from a wealthy family, and she seemed nice enough. I figured maybe Ethan had finally found the one. When Ethan asked me to be his best man, I was thrilled. Of course, I said yes. This guy was my best friend. He'd been there for me during some of the hardest times in my life, and I wanted to be there for him on his big day. Nicole was just as excited about the wedding. She'd been helping with planning and talking to Lauren about bridesmaid dresses. It seemed like a normal thing for her to be involved since she was close to Ethan too. The wedding was a big deal, a fancy event at a beautiful hotel. Nicole and I drove there together the day before. I remember feeling excited, even though things between us were tense. I kept thinking maybe this weekend would help us reconnect. Weddings have a way of reminding people about love and commitment, right? When we got to the hotel, I started feeling a migraine coming on. I get them sometimes, especially when I'm stressed or tired. Nicole wanted to go to the rehearsal dinner, so I told her to go without me while I rested in the room. Later that evening, the migraine got worse, and I realized I'd forgotten my meds. I decided to head to the parking lot to grab the car and find a pharmacy. That's when it happened. I don't know how to describe what I felt when I saw them. Ethan and Nicole were in my car, kissing like they were teenagers sneaking around. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I stood there frozen, unable to move, just staring at them. It felt like my brain was shutting down, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. They didn't even notice me. They were too caught up in each other. I don't know how long I stood there. 30 seconds? Minute? Felt like an eternity. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and for a moment, I thought I was going to throw up. Instead of confronting them, I walked away. My mind was racing, but I knew I couldn't just explode in the parking lot. I needed to think, to figure out what to do next. So I went back to the hotel and sat in my room, staring at the walls. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my gut, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too numb to cry. That night, everything started unraveling. But it wasn't just about Nicole and Ethan. As I was about to find out, the betrayal went much deeper than I could have ever imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, the image of Nicole and Ethan in the car burned into my brain. I kept thinking, how could they do this to me? Cole, the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, and Ethan, my best friend, the one guy I thought would always have my back. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. By morning, my mind wasn't just spinning from betrayal. It was racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it a one-time mistake or something more? And perhaps the scariest question of all, did anyone else know? Nicole came back to the room late the previous night, pretending everything was normal. She asked me if my migraine was better, kissed me on the forehead, and climbed into bed like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream at her right then and there, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed answers first, and I needed time to think. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. I greeted everyone at breakfast, smiled when I saw Ethan, and even made small talk with Nicole. I could feel my stomach turning every time I looked at them, but I couldn't let on that I knew. If they thought they'd gotten away with it, they'd slip up again. That's what I was counting on. After breakfast, I decided to do a little reconnaissance. I hadn't said anything to anyone yet, but I was desperate to know if this was a secret between just Ethan and Nicole, or if other people in our group knew. I figured the easiest way to find out was to hang around and listen. Later that afternoon, I overheard something that shattered me even further. I was heading back to my room when I passed one of the suites where a few of our friends were staying. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear laughter coming from inside. I wasn't going to stop, but then I heard Ethan's name, and Nicole's. I froze. At first I thought I'd misheard, but then I heard Kyle, one of the other guys in our group, make a joke about Ethan and Nicole's secret rendezvous. He said something about how, one day, they're going to get caught, and the rest of them laughed. They know, I thought. My stomach dropped as I realized the truth. Not only were my girlfriend and best friend betraying me, but my entire friend group was in on it. They all knew. The worst part? They were laughing about it. Not one of them seemed to care how much this would hurt me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. These people, who I'd spent years trusting and caring about, were sitting in that room making jokes at my expense. I couldn't listen anymore. I walked away before they noticed me, but their laughter echoed in my head. The betrayal suddenly felt so much bigger. It wasn't just about Nicole and Ethan anymore. It was all of them. Every single one of them had been lying to me, covering for Nicole and Ethan while laughing behind my back. When I got back to my room, the weight of everything hit me all at once. I sat on the edge of the bed and let out a shaky breath. My hands were trembling and I could feel tears welling up, but I didn't want to cry. Crying felt weak. Instead, I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what to do. One thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this slide. I couldn't just confront Nicole and Ethan in private and let them walk away unscathed. They'd humiliated me, so it was only fair that they felt the same pain. And if the rest of our so-called friends were complicit, they deserved to be exposed too. That's when the plan started to take shape. The rehearsal dinner that evening was torture. I went because I didn't want to tip anyone off that something was wrong, but sitting across from Ethan and Nicole was unbearable. I kept watching them, looking for signs. They didn't sit next to each other, but there were little things, stolen glances, subtle smiles, that made my blood boil. At one point, Nicole even leaned over and whispered something to me about how beautiful the venue was. I nodded, but all I could think was, You were kissing Ethan in my car less than 24 hours ago. How dare you? She acted so normal, so innocent, and it made me sick. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease. He was laughing, making jokes, and playing the role of the charming groom-to-be. It was almost impressive how effortlessly he lied to everyone around him. I stayed quiet for most of the dinner, only speaking when spoken to. Inside, I was seething, but I couldn't let it show. Not yet. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. That night, back in our room, Nicole tried to cuddle up to me. It took everything I had not to push her away. Instead, I pretended to be tired and rolled over, facing the wall. She didn't push it, and after a while, I heard her breathing slow as she fell asleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling and going over my plan. Tomorrow was the wedding, the perfect stage for everything to come to light. I wasn't just going to confront Ethan and Nicole, I was going to make sure everyone knew what they had done. I wanted the world to see them for who they really were. By morning, I felt strangely calm. The anger was still there, but it was buried under a sense of determination. Today was the day. Today, I was going to take back control. The morning of Ethan's wedding, I woke up feeling like a bomb ticking down to detonation. Nicole acted like nothing was wrong, which made my stomach churn. She asked if I wanted breakfast. I said no. I couldn't look at her face without seeing Ethan's hands on her, without hearing my so-called friends laughing at my expense. By then, I'd already decided what I was going to do. I wasn't the kind of person to make a scene or get revenge out of spite, but this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the lies, the betrayal, the complete disregard for my feelings. Nicole and Ethan thought they could do whatever they wanted and still smile at me like nothing had happened, and my friends thought they could cover for them without consequences. Not today. I spent the morning quietly getting ready. Nicole went to help the bride, Lauren, with some last-minute preparations, leaving me alone in the room. That gave me time to pack my things. I knew I wasn't staying after this wedding. Whatever happened, I was done with Nicole, Ethan, and the entire group. I wanted to make sure I could walk away clean when the time came. When it was finally time to head to the ceremony, I slipped on my suit, checked myself in the mirror, and gave myself a pep talk. You've got this. Stick to the plan. They deserve this. I arrived at the venue early, as expected for the best man. Ethan greeted me with a grin like we were still best friends. You ready for the big day, man? He asked, clapping me on the back. I smiled. Couldn't be more ready. If he noticed the edge in my voice, he didn't let on. He was too busy entertaining guests and charming everyone in sight. Nicole, meanwhile, was mingling with the bridesmaids. I avoided her as much as I could, not trusting myself to keep my emotions in check if she tried to speak to me. The ceremony itself was set in a gorgeous outdoor garden, complete with white chairs, flower arrangements, and a small stage for the vows. Guests filled the seats, buzzing with excitement. Ethan stood at the front, looking like the picture-perfect groom. Nicole sat in the second row, right where I could see her. My heart pounded as I waited for the right moment. When the officiant stepped up to begin, I stood. My voice was calm, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Before we start, I'd like to say a few words about Ethan. There was a murmur of surprise. This wasn't the usual time for speeches, but Ethan didn't object. He even smiled, probably thinking I was about to talk about our friendship and how proud I was of him. Lauren, the bride, looked curious, but gave me a polite nod. I walked to the front, turned to face the crowd, and took a deep breath. My hands were steady, my voice clear. I've known Ethan for years. He's been my best friend since college. We've been through everything together, or at least that's what I thought. Ethan's smile faltered slightly. Nicole shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Good. Over the years, I've admired Ethan's charm, his sense of humor, and his ability to keep secrets, I said, emphasizing the last word. The crowd chuckled awkwardly, sensing something was off. Ethan's face turned pale. Last night, I continued, I found out just how good Ethan is at keeping secrets. Turns out he's been hiding something from all of us. Something that I think Lauren, and everyone here, deserves to know. Lauren looked confused, glancing between Ethan and me. Ethan stepped forward, his voice tense. All right, that's enough. I raised a hand to stop him. Let me finish, Ethan. I think you owe it to everyone to hear this. I turned back to the crowd. Last night, I caught Ethan making out with my girlfriend Nicole in the parking lot. My car, actually. So while he's been planning this wedding, he's also been hooking up with someone else's partner. Mine. The gasps from the audience were deafening. Nicole shot to her feet, her face red. That's not true, she shouted, but her voice cracked. Her panic was obvious. Ethan looked furious, but also terrified. This is ridiculous. You're just trying to ruin my wedding because Nicole doesn't want to marry you. I ignored them both. It gets better, I said to the crowd, because not only have Ethan and Nicole been sneaking around, but our mutual friends, this entire group of people I thought I could trust, knew about it. They've been covering for them, laughing behind my back, even making jokes about when they'd get caught. The room was chaos. People whispered, shouted, pointed fingers. Lauren looked horrified. Is this true? She demanded, turning to Ethan. Tell me this isn't true. Ethan stumbled over his words, trying to deny it, but Lauren wasn't buying it. She ripped off her veil and stormed out, leaving Ethan shouting after her. Guests started murmuring, some following Lauren, others staring at Ethan and Nicole in shock. I didn't wait for the fallout. I walked straight off the stage, ignoring Nicole's desperate pleas to stop. You're crazy! You're ruining everything! She hissed, grabbing at my arm. I shook her off and kept walking. By the time I got to the parking lot, I could still hear the chaos behind me. I got in my car, took a deep breath, and drove away. I drove for hours that night, not caring where I was going. The adrenaline that had carried me through my speech was gone, leaving only exhaustion and a crushing sense of emptiness. My phone buzzed constantly, calls, texts, notifications from social media, but I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to face whatever came next. When I finally stopped, it was at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I parked, got out, and just stood there for a while, staring at the dark sky. My body felt heavy, my mind a mess of emotions. Anger, betrayal, a strange sense of relief. I had done it. I had exposed them. But now what? Eventually, I checked my phone. As expected, there were dozens of missed calls and texts. Nicole had sent the most, her messages starting with please, can we talk? Please let me explain, before shifting to anger. By the end, she was blaming me. You're insane for what you did. You didn't have to ruin everything. Do you even realize what you've done to Ethan? Good. She was upset. She deserved to be. There were messages from Ethan too, though fewer. Most were furious, accusing me of being jealous and vindictive. You just couldn't handle that Nicole didn't want to marry you, so you tried to ruin my life. Guess what? You didn't just hurt me. You hurt Lauren and my parents too. The rest of my so-called friends had chimed in as well. Some were furious at me for airing dirty laundry in public. Others were apologetic, claiming they didn't know the full story, as if that excused their complicity. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't ready. Instead, I got back in my car and drove to my parents' house. I hadn't been there in months, but I needed the comfort of people who actually cared about me. When I arrived, my mom took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me and told me I could stay as long as I needed. The next morning, the fallout started in full force. Nicole called again, but I let it go to voicemail. This time, she sounded desperate. Please, can we just talk? I know you're mad, but we've been together for 8 years. Don't throw that away over one mistake. I need to explain. Her words made me laugh bitterly. One mistake? Remember, this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a series of choices made over who knows how long. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd done it repeatedly, knowingly, and with my best friend. There was no coming back from that. Ethan's texts were more of the same. Angry accusations and weak justifications. You had no right to do that. You could have handled this privately, but no. You had to humiliate me in front of everyone. You're just bitter because Nicole doesn't love you anymore. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I gone too far? But then I remembered the laughter I'd overheard. The smug looks on their faces when they thought I didn't know. No, I hadn't gone too far. If anything, they deserved worse. By day 2, the silence from Lauren's side was broken. One of Ethan's groomsmen, who I barely knew, messaged me. Hey, just wanted you to know Lauren called off the wedding completely. She's staying with her parents now. Ethan's in bad shape. His parents are furious and they've kicked him out for lying to them. Good. That was the least Ethan deserved. Still, a small part of me felt guilty. Not for Ethan, but for Lauren. She was collateral damage in all this, and I hadn't wanted to hurt her. But she deserved to know the truth before committing her life to someone as deceitful as Ethan. As for Nicole, she was still living in our shared apartment. I couldn't stomach the thought of seeing her, so I asked my brother to go and pack my things. He didn't ask questions, just showed up at the apartment and called me when he was done. You're better off without her, he said, handing me the boxes. I couldn't have agreed more. The real turning point came on day 3, when Nicole showed up at my parents' house unannounced. My mom answered the door, and the look on her face when she called for me said it all. Nicole was desperate. I stepped outside to talk to her, mostly because I didn't want her causing a scene. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. I crossed my arms. "About what?" She started rambling, apologizing, blaming stress, saying she never meant for it to go this far. She even had the audacity to say Ethan didn't mean anything, and that she had been confused about our relationship. "You've been pressuring me to get married," she said, "and I felt trapped." I laughed bitterly. Trapped. You could have talked to me. You could have broken up with me if that's how you felt. But no, you decided to cheat on me with my best friend. Don't try to make this my fault. Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. She wasn't here to take responsibility. She was here to make herself feel better. When she realized I wasn't going to forgive her, she switched tactics. "You didn't have to do what you did, though. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed Ethan. You embarrassed everyone." I stared at her, my voice cold. "You embarrassed yourself." She left after that, but not before trying to guilt me one last time. "I hope you're happy," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You've ruined everything." As she walked away, I felt an odd sense of closure. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I could finally breathe. Oh, the fallout from my speech didn't just affect Nicole and Ethan. It rippled through the entire group. Word spread quickly among mutual friends, and most of them took sides. A few reached out to apologize, claiming they didn't realize how serious the situation was. Others stayed loyal to Ethan, saying I'd crossed a line by ruining his wedding. I didn't care. I blocked them all. By the end of the week, I was done with them. Nicole, Ethan, Kyle, the whole group, they were out of my life for good. It hurt to lose so many people I'd considered family, but it was better than staying surrounded by liars and betrayers. After the wedding, I thought the betrayal ended with Nicole and Ethan, but as the days passed, I couldn't stop thinking about the rest of my so-called friends. The ones who laughed behind my back, the ones who knew and chose to say nothing. They weren't just bystanders. They were complicit. They covered for Nicole and Ethan, joked about it, and acted like my pain didn't matter. I could have let it go and walked away from all of them, but that didn't sit right with me. They thought they could get away with treating me like a fool, but they were wrong. I wasn't going to explode in anger or confront them directly. No, I had a better plan. One that let me stay in the shadows while they faced the consequences of their actions. Kyle was the loudest one that night in the hotel room. He was the one who made the joke about Ethan and Nicole getting caught one day, and laughed the hardest. I remembered that smug tone in his voice, the way he seemed to relish my ignorance. If anyone deserved a dose of karma, it was him. Kyle worked for a mid-sized tech company as a sales manager. He loved to brag about how much his boss trusted him, and how he was on track for a promotion. But what most people didn't know, what I learned from our late-night hangouts, was that Kyle had a little side hustle, selling company leads to competitors for quick cash. He'd once drunkenly told us how easy it was to make a few $1,000s under the table without getting caught. That night, I put my plan into motion. Using an old email account I'd created in college, I drafted an anonymous email to Kyle's company. I included screenshots of his texts, where he bragged about selling leads, along with a detailed account of how he did it. I made sure to delete any identifying details that could trace the email back to me. Within a week, I heard through the grapevine that Kyle had been fired. Apparently, his boss didn't take too kindly to betrayal. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. Kyle had laughed at my expense, betrayed my trust, and thought he was untouchable. Now he knew how it felt to lose everything because of his own actions. Sarah wasn't as vocal as Kyle, but her silence was just as damning. She'd been part of the group for years and always claimed to be a neutral party whenever there was drama. But neutrality is just another word for complicity, and her laughter that night proved where her loyalties lay. Sarah prided herself on being a food blogger. She had a moderately successful Instagram account and even worked with a few local restaurants to promote their menus. But what she didn't tell her followers was that many of her glowing reviews were fake. She charged small, struggling restaurants for positive write-ups, regardless of the food quality. She'd once joked about writing a 5-star review for a place she never even visited. I knew exposing her would hurt her carefully curated image, and that's exactly what I did. I created a burner account and started reaching out to the restaurants she'd worked with. I posed as a concerned diner and shared screenshots of her texts, where she blatantly offered to improve their ratings for a fee. Some of these restaurants were already struggling, and Sarah's actions were exploitative at best. It didn't take long for one of the restaurant owners to post a scathing review of her. They exposed her fake reviews and included screenshots for good measure. The post went viral locally, and Sarah's reputation took a nosedive. Her followers dropped, her partnerships dried up, and she eventually deactivated her account. Amy was the social butterfly of the group. She thrived on gossip and was the one who kept everyone connected. She was also the one who always acted the friendliest to my face, even after everything. But that night in the hotel room, I heard her loud and clear. She wasn't laughing as much as Kyle or Sarah, but she didn't stop them either. Amy worked as a marketing consultant, and her reputation was everything. She loved to name-drop her high-profile clients and brag about the events she helped organize. But there was one thing she never talked about: the fake degree she used to get her foot in the door. Back in college, Amy had confessed to me in a moment of vulnerability. She dropped out halfway through her program, but had a friend forge a degree for her so she could apply for jobs. She'd been skating by ever since, relying on charm and luck to climb the ladder. I waited until she posted about landing a new client, one of the biggest accounts of her career. Then I sent an anonymous email to her employer, complete with links to public records showing she never actually graduated. It didn't take much to connect the dots. Within days, Amy's new client dropped her, and her employer launched an internal investigation. She wasn't fired outright, but she lost her biggest account, and her reputation took a hit. Word spread quickly in her industry, and she found herself struggling to get new work. The other two members of the group were minor players in the betrayal, but I didn't let them off the hook completely. One had a habit of posting overly personal details about other people's lives on social media, so I anonymously reported several of their posts for violating privacy guidelines. Their account was temporarily suspended, and they had to clean up their act. The other? They loved to gossip at work, spreading rumors about coworkers to climb the corporate ladder. I made sure their boss received a tip about their behavior, which led to some uncomfortable conversations and a warning. It wasn't as dramatic as the others, but it sent a clear message. You can't act without consequences forever. The best part of all this? None of them ever suspected me. I stayed completely in the shadows, watching as their lives unraveled in small but significant ways. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about accountability. They laughed at my pain, covered for Ethan and Nicole, and thought their actions would never catch up to them. They were wrong. By the time the dust settled, I felt a strange sense of closure. I didn't need to confront them or hear their apologies. I didn't need to argue or justify my actions. I simply removed them from my life and let the consequences of their behavior speak for themselves.